Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the regularly Planning Commission meeting of Tuesday, March 27th, 2018, for 7:30 p.m. And at this point in time, those members on the board and in the audience, please either silence or turn off your cell phones. We'll have a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How are you? Good.
Okay. All right. Next, we'll have roll call.
Ms. Fenton? Mr. Jacobson?
Here.
Mr. Jones? Mr. Crucera? Mr. McHale?
Here.
Ms. Prouse? Ms. Scripture?
Here.
Mr. Shepard?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here. Next on the agenda is approval of the regular meeting minutes from March 13th, 2018.
I will put a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from March 13th, 2018.
Support?
We have a second.
That was Jim.
Okay.
Roll
Okay, so roll call.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Ms. Scripture?
Yes.
Mr. Shepard?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Fenton?
Yes.
All right. Next, we have a presentation by our city attorney in response to this board's request for a form of surety bond.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, members of the Planning Commission, I think this is a discussion Greg and I can both give simultaneously because he did a memo on TCOs, I did. And I think we both identified the format of it, the language and so forth. And I think, it's time to decide what you want to do and how you want to process this. Let me just say preliminarily that the last couple of occasions where a TCO has been requested and an amount has been determined, the applicants acted fairly promptly in getting their own personal, their surety bond. Mark Weir on Haberman Fabrics, within 2 days, he had contacted a bonding company, got the bond issued, everything.
So he actually opened before he got the bond?
Yeah, well, he opened about simultaneously. He got the bond on Thursday, and I think it was signed on Friday, and he opened maybe Saturday. So it was all done very quickly. The other one was Clawson Center, screen wall. The parties there worked on an arrangement. A bond was issued through the owner. There were some issues, but I'm told they were resolved, but the bond was issued there. So they went out on their own and got the bond. So it's available and it's accessible, and I don't think, personally, you should be in the business of recommending either the type of surety or where to go. That's not your business. Your business is setting the bond, determining the bond amount. It has a reasonable relationship to the work done, to be done, and then also in advance, I think you want to consider a process that in advance lets the people who go before the Planning Commission realize at some time, maybe before you consider their site plan review, that if there's any concern about a TCO, let us know as soon as possible. Not be surprised at the hearing or a subsequent hearing and they come in and say, oh, I need a TCO. I mean, that's just a kerfuffle. That's everyone runs around in confusion, and it puts you in a difficult situation from the standpoint of making conditions that are realistic at that time. So I think that's an issue you want to discuss.
But John, did you say that you thought that we should reach out to them ahead of time to let them know that? Is that what you said?
I think,
misunderstanding.
yeah, I think from the standpoint, it's just in the discussion process. There's a lot of discussion between building department and applicants and so forth, and it can come up in the conversation as issues arise. If you feel as though you're going to have to not get all the work done in the time frame once you get an approved site plan and a TCO, that's available. And you can give them the statute number or the ordinance number and let them do their homework on it, or let the architect do it. But at least let them do it so the discussion starts well enough in advance. So everyone becomes aware of what the issues might be.
Can I unpack a few things that you said?
Go ahead.
You said we shouldn't be in the business of saying the type of bond. Well, the type of bond is the kind of bond that guarantees that if they fail to do what they say, it pays. I'm not sure what you meant by type of bond.
No, I'm talking about surety, performance bond, cash,
Okay.
that type of situation.
You mean the type
category,
of-
yeah.
Okay, but you're not saying.
No,
That would be options then, right?
that's
Yeah, those
their
are
option.
options. Yeah, and I don't think we've
Their
ever told them
options.
what
They
they
gotta
have to do.
figure out.
I think we just pointed out they had options.
Exactly.
Well,
Let me see if I can clarify. I think there are three basic options, and John will correct me if I'm wrong. There's cash.
Right.
There's a letter of credit.
Right.
Or there's a bond.
And we covered all those at
I
that
mean,
meeting.
surety bond, I think, is a broad term that describes everything that might fall within this category.
Correct.
You know, we're looking for something that's similar, I think, to what Haberman ended up getting.
Right.
John's right, Haberman did not, as far as I know, ask us to provide a form for it. I put their bond in the packet per John's request, so you can see what it is. It's really just a one-page document with some blanks to fill in. We've had three situations relatively recently where the surety's been needed, and given the nature of each of them, I guess, being not flush with cash in any of those cases, such that they wanted to just put up money, that they needed to complete the work and not have it available to them, they each chose to go this route. One was the 157, 159 Rochester building, Marty Kopp's building over there. And his insurance company did ask us for our form of bond, which we didn't have to give them. And then they negotiated with city attorney about what it would include. Then the other was traffic, which was the next most recent example prior to Haberman. And likewise, they asked for the form. We didn't have one, but they negotiated with city attorney about what that would include. And as that one came in, we ended up having to ask for changes after the fact that were not included in it.
Let me finish unpacking.
Okay.
So the three different types, I understand that we talked about that last time. I think that then calls for three different situations. The one is what Haberman did, and everybody knows you should be able to easily, there's people that do this all over. I mean, you can get one in the internet in 20 minutes. It's not that hard because people offer them. It's a very common thing to offer. That's one thing. The second thing is if they chose to go cash, that cash would have to be on deposit somewhere. Somebody's signing something between the city and that individual that says this is what this cash represents and who holds it, right? So that would be the form, if that's the form they chose, that cash, and that would be the document that might go with it. And then there's the other one, which is the letter of credit, which we would have nothing to do with because that would be at the bank, except we'd still need something that says you have this for this purpose, and this is what it would be used for.
Yeah, similarly, you would get language in the letter of credit that describes the terms on which you could draw upon that letter of credit. In each of those cases, it relates to fulfilling the requirements of
Right.
site plan approval.
So back to what Mr. Kingsup said about we're not in the business of doing that stuff. We're definitely not in the business of doing insurance policies. But if we expect someone, and if there's a standard format, but if we expect someone to hand cash and we would have a form. We'd have to have something someone signs.
Yeah, but
We'd
I
have to-
think, John, let me see if I can clarify what you're saying, because I think I see John's point. But John's saying that our responsibility is not to bring them up to an understanding of any of those products. We simply tell them they're going to need to do this, and here's the amount you're going to need to do for, just like we did with Haberman.
Okay.
And at that
And how they
at that
choose to
point,
do it,
it's their responsibility to figure that out, because we shouldn't, am I correct, am I mistaken here, John?
No, that's true.
We shouldn't be giving them guidance on that. Like, that's not our responsibility to give them guidance. It's simply our responsibility to say, we're going to require a bond. you say you've got $27,000 worth of work, we're going to give you, expect to see a 10% bond or whatever we're going to expect.
Then I'm going to unpack what he said about what's supposed to happen at potentially these meetings, about letting them know, and I would be stunned if that wasn't discussed at meetings. The process of, you have to, your site plan's approved, if you don't have everything in place and Jim doesn't approve you, and if you want to occupy, here's what, that is talked about, right?
Right, of course. And the question that arises, we were here 2 weeks ago on Haberman, right? He made a very substantial presentation to you, and at the end of the day, you told him what he was going to have to do. $25,000 in security, it's going to have to be done by May 31st, and you'd have to complete the things on the site plan that are incomplete right now. The result of that is before you, right?
But
The question that comes...
Can I just interject for a
Yeah,
second?
yeah.
All right, so part of what he did in his presentation, from my perspective, was that it was to sell us on the fact that he didn't need it because he's had all this success on all these other properties.
That is true. He did not succeed in doing that, fortunately, in my estimation, because you have an adopted policy, that I put back in front of you in your packet that says that, other than the exigent circumstances exception, which some of you may remember discussing and adding to the policy after the fact, which is for a very short period of time, that's what you need. You need surety. And so what happens in many of these cases, though, is that they come and they've got these blanks, and they're like, well, what do you want it to say, is the question. And it's really knowable, and it's really, it's really always the same answer, right? You've got a list that typically Jim prepares of the things that aren't done. You've got a site plan that was approved by the Planning Commission on a date certain. That is the governing document for how that site is supposed to look. That list needs to be done like it's shown on this plan by this date. That's really all it needs to say. And then they put their words around it, and I defer to John on what, those other words need to be to make sure that if that day comes, May 31st comes, and it's not done, that we can do something about it.
So I guess I'm still confused as to what is so wrong. I mean, if I go into most cities and I say, I want to apply for this, or I want to do this, or I need to do this, they will hand me a form and says, great, fill this out, name, address, the stuff you just said. I'm still a little confused.
But maybe, and I agree with you, they should have that, but maybe that's going to be a requirement out there, but it's not going to be our requirement.
Oh, I agree. I don't want anything completely, but my suggestion was never that we do anything. My suggestion was, because there was nothing in place.
That's true. Okay,
And
that's what you're
all I
saying.
asked for, and the reason I asked for this, was simply to say, just put it in a flippant, so they can fill in the blanks and turn it in. If it fits whatever they choose to do, make it easy on them. And so we don't have this constant, what's supposed to be in it, and we don't know, and we don't understand, and blah, blah, blah. I'm still missing, what am I unreasonably asking for?
I think here's an example of one, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if this one's acceptable, maybe we could show that one to people.
I could
and
not
say-
care less what it is. I just want something that makes sense and that everybody agrees on makes sense.
And that's what they want. That's what we've heard, like, okay, show us one that's okay, and we'll give you one just like it.
Sample across the top of it
Yep,
as part of your
yep.
packet.
There you go.
Yeah, here's one here's a go, no go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which brings me to my questions. Is this just a facsimile, or is this a bona fide?
The Western Surety one?
Yes.
That's Haberman's bond that they,
Okay, well, that brings up questions as I'm reading it. Okay, we have Keyport Capital LLC is the principal. Okay, we go to the next paragraph, and it says, whereas the principal has entered into an agreement with the obligee, which is us, guaranteeing only that the principal will complete site improvements as per estimate prepared by blank.
right, well, that's not what it should say. It should
Oh.
say, as per the approved, site plan approved by the Clawson Planning Commission on such
Okay,
and such
so-
a date.
Okay,
Plans dated, blah, blah, blah.
and then to continue, attached to and made part of hereof at certain land known as repainting a parking lot?
Yep,
Okay, so I am reading this correctly. Shouldn't we be a little more specific as to address that it would entail?
Agreed?
Okay, so I am seeing what I'm seeing then. Is this acceptable?
That's what they presented.
We can't reject it?
We
Or
can.
as the city representatives reject it because it's pretty vague when it comes to that?
And I actually have the same concern and question. The only thing can anticipate coming in the next 2 seconds in rebuttal is our job is to make sure that we get one, and we always say to them, to the satisfaction of the city staff. So while I actually agree with you that I think that is insufficient and inadequate and probably should have been vetted better, it is not our call.
No, I
Because
understand, but,
we delegate that to someone.
but in looking out for the city, it should be quite specific as far as
Yeah, I agree with that.
property, things like that.
But we
Agreed.
can't fault Haberman.
No, I'm not faulting him. I mean, just an observation that I think it definitely should have been a little more specific.
I agree.
Thanks for agreeing, John.
All right.
That's good. I covered my paragraphs.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope, my question's been answered.
Okay. I guess as far as, what situations have we come across in the past couple of years where we've had to exercise one of these?
None that I'm aware of. Jim, have you had to call on any bonds at any point?
In the past, we've had to call in a surety bond. That was before my time. We've threatened to call in bonds, and we've done some of the work, and we have seized the cash deposits, the line of credit, for work. So.
And as far as once that happens, and whoever is supposed to be completing that site plan, if they don't do it, do we call them up for?
Well, that's what we've called them back in front of this
Yeah.
board many a times.
Sure, I'm not saying I'm saying the person who can no longer perform the site plan. The applicant is gone, right? And now we're trying to expect that the performance be done, and that person's no longer, and we've never come across in that situation. But if we did, what's the next step?
When the applicant is gone, then if we seize the bond to finish the site plan for the occupants, or for the applicant's occupancy,
Yeah.
and the applicant's gone, it's impossible to complete.
Yeah.
Usually when the applicant vacates the property and walks away,
Okay.
we release the bond company of their obligation, and we start from
Okay.
square one with a new developer.
Right.
Okay.
Where we have seized the bond was on the DPW building. That, they failed on that, and we seized the funds to complete the work. We had cash bond regarding collision company over on Main for the paving on that.
Oh, on Rochester.
South Rochester
South
Road,
Rochester, yeah.
Cass Collision.
Okay.
Yeah, cash collision. They posted a cash bond. And when you do the cash bond, there are always terms, which are negotiated peculiar to that situation. You know, there's never a standard.
Blank lines that get filled in on a form.
It's not lines filled in on a form. Kimco, was it a deposit?
That was a
100K?
100,000. I believe it was a performance bond or a surety
Yeah, that was a
bond.
performance bond for 100K
Okay.
on them.
And we worked on them. I think we were looking at even more than that at one point in time.
Well, no, we were much less, and then they increased it to 100.
Was that right? I
Yeah,
thought-
we were at 50, and they increased it to 100K.
Okay.
No, that was you, John. There was a member of this planning commission that was wanted at 200,000.
I was going to say 250 or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there was varying opinions. How about that?
It's called negotiating
I understand.
publicly.
I mean, they came through, right? But that was part of the stipulation was that, okay, you're going to have to meet these monthly requirements, which they fulfilled, right? And to that satisfaction, right? So,
Right.
I mean, that's part of, what we've had a problem with in a number of instances is for, and I need to bring it up. I hate to, but Famous Chicken, right? Constantly coming up here. What are you
Exactly.
doing? What are you doing? Instead of a report, we get a sob story every time.
That's
Right?
exactly correct.
And that's my concern as far as for this, right, we get a sheet of paper, right? So in the end, we spent all that time, and they really should have been vetted before that as far as their capability. That's my opinion, all right? So as far as whether or not that's the case or not.
I agree, and that's an example of why I think maybe, it's not that anyone has been at fault, but I think it's maybe we become aware of the fact that perhaps the discussion on TCOs ought to be a lot earlier. So we don't get into the Famous Chicken situation, but we go way before that and begin to set down, it ain't going to be modified.
Yeah.
That's it, the risk's on you.
Yeah.
It was my impression that once we approved the TCO procedure, that was being shared with applicants at an earlier stage. Is that not true?
I don't know that.
Yeah, it is, of course.
So I'm confused because
Fine.
the first and second paragraphs of this make it seem like it's not. There's been considerable discussion on temporary certificates of occupancy, and the underlying form of security to assure work still to be done will in fact occur after the TCO is issued. And then the second one says one alternative is providing information about TCO requirements at the beginning of the stage. That makes it sound like that's not what's happening now.
It is. When we meet as a development team with applicants, they're apprised of what the process
So they
is.
do know.
Right, and I mean, it doesn't seem like there's been any confusion on their part, right? They come here, they know to come here, they know that they have to request that of you, that you are the body that has authority to issue it, and that you set the basic terms.
Well, I
mean,
didn't think so
that's-
either until the Haberman fabrics. That's where I got some concern because it seemed like they came to the meeting either thinking that there was an ability to modify the policy or
Right.
that's where the question comes up for me.
I believe they came to the meeting because it's their right to request to modify the bond or request no bond. It's their right to request
I
it.
get that, but there was a lead up. The city attorney
informed
gave a lead up, like, hear them out. It seemed like there was a conversation that happened beforehand that there was an expectation. That's why I asked the question during the meeting, and he said no. But that's where I have a little bit of confusion because it seemed like he came to the meeting with more than just I'll just try it and see if it works.
No, that's really how he
That's
did
why.
it, because I had the discussion with him the preceding Friday and told him precisely about the TCO and its purpose and what had to be done. And he said, yeah, fine. And I said, furnish all the information to me so I can get that ready for the TCO over the weekend. When he didn't do it, I called him Monday, and that's when he told me he had reflected upon this and wanted to pitch his case. And that's when I advised him that I didn't think he would be successful. He could do it, and if that is what he's going to do, then go ahead and do it, but face the consequence. You're not going to put the sale up.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify for
Well, no, that was-
procedurally when things are happening, so we know when they come in front of us.
I don't think it was a waste of time, to be honest with you. I mean, we understood. I mean, and that's my concern, right, as far as they're coming up and knowing that we're not going to give it to them, right? If that's their right, right, I'm not going to say no. We're going to say this is what's up front.
And
Now, as far
actually,
as-
it was beneficial to him because we actually gave him less of a.
Got off
yeah.
lightly because of
Right.
it.
So I
It
mean,
really did.
It benefited him to do that, and I think we all felt comfortable with doing that for him, so.
But you did follow really the rule of reason, and that is the amount of bond ought to have some relationship to the additional expense that's got to be done,
Yep.
or the category of work that has to be done. And that way you are not arbitrary or capricious in setting the amount. It has a realistic relationship, and you did that in that case.
Which looking back as far as Fantastic Sam's and what they came in front of us, I wish we had had a bit better information because I'm thinking that was a little on the light side. As far
Well,
as what they're.
not that they ever provided.
No, he
it.
didn't. That's the point, right? So like, okay, we're trying to set something and we don't really have anything to work with, but other than we're trying to be business friendly. But
Well, I did have conversations with Steve,
Okay.
and his amount was objecting to the amount. And I said, fine, you object to the amount, what are you willing to pay?
Yeah.
He said, well, it costs this, this, and this. I said, okay, then that's what you're willing to pay. He said, well, I got to think about it, and I'm going on vacation. So I said, call me when you get back. Well, there you are.
Okay.
I mean, that's an example of, not really wanting to grant that TCO if you don't have the surety,
Yeah.
because there they sit. Now,
And that's the struggle that I think we all have as far as, okay, we need to be fair, right? And not only that, but consistent, right? Because we've brought it up, I don't know how many times, precedence.
Yeah, it is. And the argument that you're not business-friendly in this context is really ridiculous when you think about the fact you are friendly, business-friendly, by offering them the opportunity
have a TCO.
to get a TCO.
Yep.
So you are. And I don't think, we need to change our position when we hear the argument, you're not business-friendly because you're not giving us what we want.
Yeah. Okay. So as far as moving forward, so we're going to include a sample?
well,
that,
this was your item. You had asked John to be here for this meeting to discuss, this topic. And so my only inclusion was to give you your policy on TCOs
understand.
that you adopted way back when.
But one thing you may want to consider, and Susie's always in these development meetings and takes detailed notes of everything, is the fact that if a TCO is discussed in the development meetings, and I'm not in them, but if it is discussed, she can always give a report to the Planning Commission of those circumstances where that was discussed. So you're beginning to set the time frame and the record on when that was discussed. So if eventually it becomes an issue with the applicant, you have a record to refer on. And again, you're always throwing it back to them. As long as they were informed reasonably and as long as they were aware of what the requirements are, they don't have an excuse to say I wasn't informed. And that is where you want to put them.
Sure. And the proper place is in other business, right? But at the same time, I don't want to go out and make it a recurring set agenda item and saying, what do we have for TCOs?
I agree with you. It can be just a memo to you, an informational item. You can do it monthly. But at least you have the information item that part of the process is there, so that if they come, you'll have a record that you can remind them of.
When you adopted the policy in 2016, we also included a reference to it in the zoning ordinance. We amended section 3415, which relates to certificates of occupancy, to have specific paragraphs on how commercial TCOs are issued, and the circumstances, first of all, that it's the Planning Commission that does that, and then the conditions the basic conditions that have to be met in order to qualify for one. And so, that's published in the city code now at this point. There really shouldn't be any confusion about that. But to Commissioner Fenton's point, it is, the path forward to occupancy is always discussed in development team meetings from the beginning when an applicant first comes to us, and they've got a plan in mind for when they need to be occupying the property and doing business. So it's fairly well understood, and the problems we've come up with have not seemed to me to be in getting them here before you in a timely fashion and getting you to respond to their request. You meet every 2 weeks. That provides for a fairly timely response for anyone who's looking a little bit down the road toward what their needs are for occupancy.
So I'm confused, John. It seemed like you were telling us that this was something we don't like or shouldn't like that you gave us?
No.
Your draft? Like, but it felt
No,
like
no,
you were saying-
that was just informational.
Because, I looked at it, it's pretty simple. It's got the date and the amount, and it refers to the minutes.
It's just
It's a
informational.
two-pager. It covers, but, so it sounded like, though, I was gonna say, close enough for me.
Yeah,
Nothing
but
jumped
they-
out at me, but then you seem to be saying.
Yeah, I am, because if you're talking about an insurance company issuing it or a bond company issuing, they have their own forms.
No, I'm
Oh.
just simply saying if the city is asking them for a bond.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't want to, if they just want to hand you $30,000.
Sure, sure.
This is what you'd give
Sure,
them.
that's what you give them.
And there's nothing, but it sounded
And
like
if
you're
they
telling
want
us it
to,
was
if they
bad.
want to modify it, let them do it, but,
But you're not saying it's bad.
no, it's not
Oh.
bad. No,
Well,
no,
it's-
no.
I was like.
No.
Because I was like, yeah, that looks good, that covers it.
No,
And then I
it's
thought
not.
you were telling us that, no, by the way, I don't think this is a good idea. Oh, okay.
If I could suggest, it seems like there are key elements, right, that need to be included, as Commissioner McHale pointed out. You know, there are things missing from this Western surety bond that we would like to see. Reference to the site plan, reference to the property, reference to the final site inspection that was done by the building official, so on and so forth, timeframes, you know. That perhaps what is needed is not even a form of bond, but rather a checklist of things that that bond must include.
Which, this example of if they were to do something with the city and hand us money, this example does that.
It would be true, I would say, for any of the three forms,
Right,
right?
right.
There are certain things that each of
Right.
those things, each of those agreements needs to incant, so that you know that it's understood what the obligations are, and you can call upon it if you need to, if the work's not complete.
And so the second step to this would be that list should be created.
That might be another alternative to just creating the
Which,
form.
because based on the things you just kind of went through and your issues, those seem to be covered in the form you gave us, right?
Right.
I mean, you covered that in your thing. I mean, it references the site plan, it references, refer to the minutes, it has the amount, right? So then if you had that checklist, or whatever you're saying, that would apply if they don't want to go through the city and they say, well, we're going to do X, Y, Z, say, great, just make sure it includes these 6
That's
items and you're good to
right.
go.
That's exactly
Right.
correct.
So that's the missing part of our puzzle
Yeah.
right now.
Because the whole theme of this, that Greg has mentioned in his document and mine is, you put the onus of responsibility on the business owner. They become the stuckee because they are requesting the relief. And I'm putting it bluntly, because if you have to take some summary action later on in connection with that security that's been posted, they don't have an argument. Or some lawyer that they go to is going to say, wait, you agreed on something, you acknowledged this, so. And that's very important, because you're sending that message not only to the applicant, you're sending the message to their lawyer.
So it's not our role to, you just presented us this draft because A, I asked for it.
Right.
B, and we wouldn't be voting on the form or anything
No.
else, right? That, again, falls to you guys. We're just simply
Right.
saying, thank you,
Right.
we like this. Can you do a list
Yeah.
that you just described also to add to that
Sure.
little kind of thing? And that, we're not voting on anything,
No.
right? We're just saying, wow, thank you, and yes, this kind of is what we were
That's-
talking about.
Exactly.
Just some helpful guidelines.
You're shaking.
No,
your head.
the only thing we have is a decision on the TCO, that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then I guess I'm saying, thank you, John, this looks good to me.
Well, it's
and
both of us, really. that-
thank you, everybody who did
provide.
this, and I would like to see that list that you just hand them and say, great, if you don't want to do this, here's what you need to make sure you include on the bond, and everything's golden. And then, if that's given to them at these meetings that you talk to them about, then it should avoid issues.
And again, as far as with Haberman, and I don't want to discourage anybody who wants to come up here
No, no.
and say their piece as far as why they shouldn't, they think that they shouldn't come away with an opportunity to say, can you pass, forego it, right?
You're right.
So,
That's fine,
right.
yeah, I'm not complaining about that at all.
No.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for your input. It's been very good.
no, appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Okay. Next on the agenda, public discussion, items not on the agenda. Anyone from the public like to speak? Okay, I will close public discussion.
I have one thing to say. I finally got the transcript from the study session that you had.
Oh, yeah.
The workshop. So I gave it to Mike electronically to send to you all. because I think there are a bunch of pages that you want to go through. And I know the mayor wants to try to schedule another one in May or June or maybe July as a follow-up on that. And I think the focus also was working on a mission statement. So when you get that document and feel like you have nothing to do, then you can sit down and read portions of the transcript and begin to focus on how you'd like to frame that mission statement.
Sure, no, I agree. So is there a timeframe?
Nothing set yet as far as the reconvening.
How's our agenda look for the rest of this quarter, going into the summer? Is it completely full? I mean, this is nice, the fact that we had a shortened agenda. but-
Well, we booted off 2 site plans that wanted to be on because they weren't ready.
Okay.
So those will certainly be coming back. There's a third, so the site plans were the new home of House of Optical, the former home of Discount Fabrics. What was the other one that we kicked off? Oh, the old home of House of Optical, the new home of Discount Fabric. Those were the 2 site plans we didn't approve for the agenda, and then 1330 North Crooks is coming probably to your next meeting for sure with their first site plan that you will see for the use of that property.
And which meeting is in May is the apocalypse of all of these extensions?
The first meeting in June.
June
First
30.
meeting?
Well,
May
many of them
31st, right.
end on May 31st,
Right,
but
Yeah.
that's what I,
yeah,
So-
I don't know that's the reason they should all be back here asking for extensions. That's the reason why.
That's my whole, I mean, as far as. are
We should be
going to-
collecting up our money and doing some landscaping.
There we go.
right.
About time. Okay. Yeah, because I think as far as the joint meeting that we had was fantastic. I think that was really constructive. And I'd like to see it happen again soon, but obviously we have, not necessarily on the day that it was scheduled. I think we need an alternate.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but anyway. Okay, all right, other business.
Also, for the next agenda, Osaka has been contacting me today about clarifications on the alterations to their site plan and barrier-free accessibility. I think you've already got some documentation on that. They're clarifying the ramp slope and other items that we requested. Good news, the old Zorba's location, 309 North Main, will be opening up as a Chutney's Indian cuisine restaurant. That actually didn't come in front of this board because they reactivated within 6 months for the similar use. Did change ownership, but it's not in the downtown, so it didn't have to come in front of this board. It went through initial merchant's license. So stuff on the outside still needs to be done. Building safe, clean on the inside, so enjoy some Indian cuisine starting this weekend.
So they took the sign, they cut it down.
Correct.
Okay.
They have to put a masonry base around it per
Okay.
our ordinance. That's one of the things that they'll have until midsummer to complete.
Yeah, don't say
So-
May 31st.
Yep.
And then one of the members of the public was the artist for House of Optical. She was expecting them to be on the agenda tonight. They didn't tell her it wasn't put on the
Oh, that's
agenda.
Oh.
They're trying to clear the way for her to start her rendition. It's going to be the wall of frame, just like they had on the other one, but with newer members, Lady Gaga and Steve Austin, or not Steve Austin, that's the old
There's the new one.
Austin Powers.
$3 man out there.
Yeah, I had the wrong.
Kids will know him.
Yeah,
They took off Sally Jesse Raphael at one point, so.
yeah. So
I know.
they don't have a finalized drawing, but that's what she was going to ask if she can proceed with that from this board once she gets her final rendition. While they're going through I believe the plans were insufficient on the parking lot was the main headache.
It wasn't really a site plan, it was a picture of an AEW site plan.
So that's what, Their contractors completed construction drawings, and those seemed sufficient. It was just the application that put them behind was the site plan itself, so.
So how much renovation or modification to the front? They still have the Greek columns out in front?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
The question comes up, so this is within the shared parking agreement area, that runs between Renshaw and Pear there. And in the exhibits to that, certain things were contemplated in terms of future improvements to the layout, islands and landscaping and curbing and things within there. And some of those impact the site. And so what they did in their attempt to create a site plan was took a picture of AEW's drawing, put it on somebody else's, over somebody else's title block, and then drew on, and then changed the notes from curbing to painted lines and put some planters in the midst of them. So I have sought clarification on their intent.
There wasn't expressed that it was inadequate, or?
I suggested that planters amidst painted lines would probably not be adequate.
Okay, all right. So it
I
was-
think what they need to show is what's out there, and then the original concept plan, and show the difference on what can be placed out there and practicality. And, because there's a lot of curbing and landscaping that practically won't work on the site that was part of the original design, so.
The area between Renshaw Lounge and the store seems to be tighter than was contemplated. But as it turns out, it's not actually part of their property either. Their property line is basically the west side of the building. But the other side, between the store and Old Port, is fairly spacious. And I think maybe they can do something over there.
Okay.
And that is their property.
So this mural, are they doing it on which side of the wall? Or not inside or outside, but as far as east or west, or
West
both?
side, I think,
West side?
right.
I believe it was the west side.
Okay.
I didn't clarify that tonight when I talked to her at the beginning of the meeting.
Did she notice that I wear glasses? Did she happen to notice that when she was out there?
Yeah, she was asking
She
for,
took a picture of you before the meeting.
It's going to work out great, I think. I think it's really going to be good.
It's not just about you, Scott.
It is to me.
All right. Any other new business? Or any other business, whether it's new or old?
We had a couple meetings we recently that probably haven't reported to you yet. I'll play the Susie role here since she's not here. She has stomach flu. We met with someone other than the current owners of Famous / Atomic Chicken who are interested in occupying that site also for restaurant. This one would include a sit-down area. Made very clear that there shall be a parking lot before anything else. And so, they went away still interested. We'll see what comes of that. And then we also had someone interested in the former Toto, former PX2 building for both a brew pub and sale of brewing supplies in that
would be cool.
location. So the issue there is they don't have a ton of parking.
Parking,
of
yeah.
They don't
course.
have a ton of space for that either, would they?
A lot of space inside for, for their needs, but
Really?
they only got about 11 parking spots, and they're not, and so unclear whether they would be able to demonstrate shared parking. That would have to be in the form of street spots if they can demonstrate
there's not
enough
a lot of
shared
parking,
parking.
yeah.
But the lots behind it are also available for sale, whether the economics of it work.
You mean, there's a home on the other side, right? Is
Well,
that
one
the-
of them's gone, I think.
Yeah, that-
both of those houses are gone behind Toto.
Those are both zone city center, the property, so houses can't be rebuilt on that property now that they're down, because it's city center. So those are the two prospects that I'm aware of.
And as far as any other progress on some slowly developing, one that comes to mind as I drive north now for my commute, I see KFC. We brought that up the last time. So are they planning on doing anything this year?
We received a notice from Kentucky Fried Chicken after we announced it in the State of the City address that they were going to remodel, that they had postponed the plans for another year. So we'll see if that gets reactivated or not.
Okay.
Have you seen the rebranded Kentucky Fried Chickens? The entire building looks like a chicken bucket with the red and white stripes.
They'll turn our whole building
That's
into a
why
bucket.
we brought it to your attention,
Okay.
because it is a drastic change.
Okay.
I'm assuming you've heard nothing else about Blue Moon, that just stays where it is.
Blue Moon, you should have gotten an email today. My second notice telling them that the city is going to enter the property and remove the blight issues on the property.
The landscaping, actually, as I look at it, it's pretty unique. They've got a couple of nice specimens I'd hate to see go if somebody comes in.
If you get a chance, please meet with me, because I'm going to be marking up scrub trees that I want to take out on the
Okay.
property, and I don't want my definition of a scrub
Okay.
tree being your definition
Okay.
of a unique
There's a
species.
dawn redwood that's there, and like, what is a dawn redwood? Which is amazing, don't get me wrong, but that's one of those that like, gee, this is something that we could use as an example.
Okay.
So,
All right.
but
Thank you.
anyway, yeah, you're welcome. I'll meet you afterwards. Okay. Let's see. Anything else for other business? Any comments? Want to close the meeting?
Just a comment.
Sure.
Hope everybody this weekend has a safe and happy weekend.
Excellent. All right. Do we
I
have,
make a motion to close the meeting?
Support?
roll call?
Mr. McHale?
Yes.
Ms. Scripture? Yes. Mr. Shepherd?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Fenton?
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yes.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.